I have been fostered and trained by all the great masters of the Ullith. I am wise. I direct all the judgments of the men of Ulster. I am a great host of feasts, settling gifts and spoils. I aid in honour and fines. Fergus trained me so that I may slay strong warriors through my valour. I am fierce. I am able to guard the borders of the land against foreign foes. I am a shelter to every poor man, a rampart of fight to every rich man. I give comfort to every wretch. I deal mischief to every strong man. I can surpass any man in valour, in combat, in skills, wisdom, in splendour, cleverness, in justice, and boldness. I am a match for any chariot chief, and I give thanks to no one but Conhovar. Kavad has trained me so that I am skillful in the arts of the god of druidism, so that I am learned in the excellencies of knowledge. I fight for the honour of all alike. Honourably have I been asked by Lugh, son of Con and Enya, to journey to the tumultuous house of the Brugh. This is how Cuchulain describes himself in the wooing of Emer, and we might say that much of this might well apply to his divine father. Cuchulain, the master of the battle fury, is not only the image of the perfect warrior, but in many ways the representation of the perfect noble man. He fights with honour, is ruthless but also merciful, confident and fearless but wise and knowledgeable in all things. He is not only the greatest of the chariot warriors, but can also fashion his own chariot right from the tree. He can meditate in 5 feet of snow and have it melt around him from the heat of his battle ardour. He can take on an entire army single-handedly, casting his slingshot of death into the camp by night, slaying hundreds at a time, but merciful enough to spare anyone who simply wears a sign that they wish to come under his protection. He possesses youthful, beardless beauty, yet can transform into a hideous beast that will destroy anything around him when provoked. In many ways he is the mortal image of his divine father, Lugh of the Long Hand. To understand Cuchulain, let us start from the very beginning, and now would also be a good time to hit the like button, subscribe button, and consider checking out the Patreon page and becoming a supporter of the channel financially. It will really help us to grow, to be able to produce more content and higher quality content. It's very important, especially now, that we ground ourselves in our traditions, learn our spiritual history, and that we can understand these things in a mature way. And to do that, there is a lot of time, a lot of effort that goes into this. So all of your support is very much appreciated. So to get back to our tale. One blustery winter night, in this semi-mythical time of the legendary king of Ullith, Conhovar mac Nessa, strange birds have come to the land of the Ullith and stripped the grass to the ground. To protect the pastures and the land, the king sets out with his sister Diechtena and a company of 9 charioteers to scatter the birds. And the birds take flight, but Conhovar notices that each pair of them are linked together by silver chains. And these chains refer to the invisible links and connections that the birds have to each other and as a flock. As if in a trance, they chase after the birds for a long while until near nightfall. 3 of these birds break away and head toward the Brugh na Boine, a great sacred site of Ireland. The cold sweeps in and the snow begins to fall. Conhovar orders his men to find somewhere to stay for the night. They happen upon a house that has never been there before, brand new and of fine size, with storehouses and cover for the horses and a fine young man who owns it. The nameless young man invites Conhovar and his fellows in, but informs them that his wife is in the storehouse and is in her labour pains. Diechtena goes to help her, and Conhovar settles down with the young man and has a fine night of drinking and merriment. During the night his son is born, and Diechtena serves as his nurse. At the same time, a mare outside gives birth to twin foals. In the morning when they awake, the house has disappeared. Instead, they are just outside the Brugh na Boine, which was the true house they had stayed in, and the house the child was born in. as was prophesied by Cavad. Diachtainna is left with the boy. The 2 foals are given to him as a gift, and they head back to Ewen Macha. The boy contracts an illness and dies after his infancy, and Diachtainna grieves heavily for his loss. After crying a long spell, she goes to get a drink of water from a bronze cup, and while she is drinking, a little thing leaps into her mouth from the water. This little thing is in fact the spirit of the boy, which is still in her presence, still in the house, that is able to pass from the other world into her world and into her mouth through the medium of the water. That night Diachtainna has a dream. Lugh appears to her and tells her the truth of it. It was he who led them, as the bird flock, to the Brug na Boine. The child who had died was his, and the spirit that had been implanted in her now was of him and by him. She was to name him Setanta, and give him the foals that were born alongside him. Now, please note that in other versions, the actual mother of the first child was Diachtainna herself, who had accompanied Lugh in the form of a bird. However, trouble is brewing when word of Diachtainna's pregnancy gets out, and the father is unknown. There are suggestions that the father is in fact Conchobar, for it was said that he used to lay down together with his sister when they were out in his chariot. To avoid this accusation, Conchobar has his sister wed Sualtam, one of the warriors of noble birth. Out of shame, Diachtainna attempts to abort the child and goes to her wedding bed a virgin, revealing that no sexual union had ever taken place. However, when a child is born to her, nominally of Sualtam, she names the boy Setanta, for the spirit that was placed inside her by Lugh is still present, and it latches on to the baby of Sualtam and Diachtainna in the womb. Let us pause here and look at some details. That Cuchulain is born in the dead of winter, in a snowstorm, in a grave mound is surely significant, as is the fact that Lugh takes the form of birds. King Conara was also born of a god who came to his mother in the form of a bird. And a flock of birds, perhaps ravens, transforms into men when Conara attacks them, and they identify themselves as the bird troops of his father. However, the horses are also significant. Elsewhere, Cuchulain's horses are said to be the horse twins of Macha, and so they are closely linked together. Macha is a goddess of sovereignty, war, horses, among other things, who is called the son of womenfolk, linking her to a solar role. Cuchulain makes the following statement in this regard: "Over the foam of the 2 horses of Ewen am I come." This foam is created when Nemed, the primordial god of the sky, raised up 2 horses with his wife, Macha. When they went loose and ran, a river of foam spread out and covered the world for a year. This foam seems then to refer to clouds, or possibly the agitated surface of the sea. That the son of Lugh would ride these horses of Nemed and Macha likely connects him to being a master of wind and cloud, or conversely a master of the surface of the waters. Cuchulain grows up extremely fast, and is at least twice as strong as his age. When he is but a child of 5 or 6, he's already performing heroic feats. He decides to leave home, the plain of Merhemna, and go to his uncle Conchobar. That Cuchulain should be raised on the plain of Merhemna is perhaps significant in that this plain is associated with the sea, from which it derives its name. The Dagda was said to have banished a sea monster from it and caused the sea to recede. At any rate, Cuchulain, not understanding the custom of asking protection while at Ewen, ends up fighting and defeating the entire boy troop using his battle rage. He then has them ask him for protection, whereas he will only ask protection from Conchobar. As one of the rumors of his birth hint at, it is possible to view Conchobar as in fact the father of Cuchulain, especially given that in the Lawer Gavala Erin, Lugh is once referred to as Conchobar. Cuchulain performs many great deeds in his youth, such as slaying the hound of Cuchulain, from which he gets the name Cuchulain, as he vows to Cuchulain the smith that he will guard all the cattle on behalf of the hound which he had slain, which was set out at night to guard the flocks. Therefore Cuchulain will, like the guard hound, go sleepless through the night in order to guard the boundaries and flocks. In another amazing tale, Conhovar's forces are defeated and the king is left on the battlefield. Cuchulain wakes up fearing the worst, and as he does so he cracks 2 boulders that are beside him as he sleeps. He rushes into the battlefield at night, and is confronted by ghosts of the recently slain, and he's overpowered by them at first. But the voice of the Morrigan mocking him stirs him to anger, and that anger gives him the strength to fight off the demons, the ghosts that are pulling him down, and he goes and he finds Conhovar. The king is submerged in a hole, invoking the notions that in some way he is in fact in a grave. Cuchulain yanks him up with great strength, and then Conhovar asks him to get him a pig so that he might come alive again. The boy warrior does this, and then leads Conhovar and one of his sons out of the battlefield, which appears much more like an otherworld journey than a real journey. Another of his feats has him controlling stags with only a stern look, and the ability to stun and tame birds. In various tales, Cuchulain is often appealed to in order to either capture or slay birds of various kinds with his sling. He also once kills a raven and smears its blood on his face, and this is likely a ritual act of gaining the power of the animal, and the power would seem to relate to death. Now, of course, Cuchulain's most famous trait is the battle rage, and like no other hero perhaps in all of myth, he is associated with this rage. Cuchulain calls himself the hero of the affliction of hounds, which is to say rabies. He is the lord of battle fury, akin to Odin. But in addition, Cuchulain is essentially a werewolf, not in the modern Hollywood sense, but he does transform into a terrible and hideous beast. And he does this through the power of the battle rage, which is linked to the practice of a certain warrior group in Indo-European society that modeled themselves after wolves. These bands were known as the Fianna in ancient Ireland. So Cuchulain is named for a hound or wolf, is said to be filling the role of a hound, and he partakes in the warrior frenzy where he physically transforms into a hound-like beast with hair that sticks straight up on end, like the snarling wolf. Cuchulain is also associated with having one eye, or a squinting eye, for when he goes into his fury, one of his eyes disappears into his head. And perhaps related to this, in the wooing of Emer it is said that Cuchulain trained in poetry under Ulbechen Sexa, meaning wolf of the Saxons. Now one might postulate that this wolf of the Saxons is Woden, who is also a god of poetry and inspiration, in many ways probably cognate with Lugh, and it would be fitting, of course, to learn poetry under such a deity. In the wooing of Emer, Cuchulain seeks a wife who resides in Lugh the Loga, which may mean Lugh's offense remission or sin remission. It would seem to associate him with cleansing, purification of the soul. Emer's father and the lord of Lugh the Loga is Forgal, meaning one who bears witness, in the sense of a court of law, witnessing an oath or testimony. Now one might speculate that this location is an underworld location, linked to a place where the soul goes after death. And one might also think that because Forgal is in fact the cousin of the king of the Favoyri. But this location is clearly linked by the name of it itself to Lugh. Why this might be the case we will deal with in another video. Emer insists that in order to win her hand, Cuchulain must perform remarkable feats of death-dealing, and must go without sleep for the entire year. He must fill the role of the Watcher, the guardian by day and night. Of Lugh it is said that he obtained no celestial rest, and so Cuchulain must reenact this feat of his divine father. He must also acquire special training to master the slaying of men, and he must embark on yet another otherworld journey in order to reach the home of Skar, a female warrior who will teach him the secret combat arts. Scach means one who is of the shadow. The journeys are emphasizing his original name, Shatantha, knower of the pathways, one who can travel between worlds, between mental states, and master the connection between all things. In order to get to this other realm, he can only advance alone, and he does not know the way. When hope begins to fade, a strange beast appears, which is likened to a lion. The creature lets Cuchulain ride on its back for several days, and brings him to a strange house where a young man and maiden reside. The maiden claims to know him, having trained together with him in poetry under Ulbecan's Sexa, the wolf of the Saxons. The young man is named Echu Bercha, meaning horseman cowherd. He tells Cuchulain how to access the land of Scach, and he even provides him the means to get there. A large single wheel and an apple. Cuchulain must ride atop the single wheel, across the deadly plain that will freeze a man in his tracks, and then follow an apple through a deadly glen full of monsters where if he strays off the right path, he will be devoured by them. Both seem to be references to a pathway into the land of the dead, and Cuchulain must ride atop the single wheel, likely referencing the sun and a solar pathway. Now, it has been speculated that this young mysterious figure who helps Cuchulain is in fact Lugh, in one of his many disguises, under one of his many obscure names that in some way reflect on his celestial functions. We see Lugh presented in this way in various other myths that will be detailed at another time. But even in the intro to this very video, for instance, we discuss the birth of Cuchulain, in which Lugh takes a disguise as a young, unknown man in an unknown, mysterious house. So, like Odin, in the Norse tradition, Lugh is appearing here and there under various different names. It is unusual for him to reveal himself directly. Instead, he goes under different guises. So Cuchulain arrives in the realm of Scach after completing this arduous journey. He defeats her enemy, her own sister, Aoife, and has a child with her. Then Scach teaches him the Gai Bolga, the ultimate attack. It must be cast with the foot, and must also be cast in water. It is described as feeling like hundreds of barbs going into the body, which can only be removed by hacking the body to pieces. Whenever it is cast, it does not miss, and it's always fatal. No armor may stop it, not even stone. This is the ultimate strike of death. In the phantom chariot of Cuchulain, it is the wind, the cold wind that rises up from hell, which is described as a spear that would pierce the very earth. Whatever it might be, the one thing it isn't is a ray of the sun, as some have suggested. Picking up on the element we discussed earlier, water is the boundary between worlds, and it might be that the Gai Bolga is an otherworld blast of death itself, which must come through water. The prophecy of Scach is even more clear on this association with death. It associates him with fields of dead bodies, gallows, the spirits of the dead crying out, and a meeting and judgment with him upon death, and calls him the one who will avert doomsday and bring the festival of the food games, which would seem to mean Lunasa. And so one wonders who this prophecy is really about, Cuchulain or Lugh. In the Tan, Cuchulain is the great protector, the one who guards the boundaries and borders day and night, like the hound whom he vowed to replace. Interestingly, he is most fearsome by night. To avoid his nighttime form, he tells his friends among the troops of Connacht to wear a special emblem so he might be able to tell them apart. Allil and Maeve agree to send him gifts to appease him, and these gifts are delivered to him by night, which is something done, generally, to chthonic deities. And when this does not work, they resort to human sacrifice, one per day, by sending them into the ford to battle him. This war takes place from the start of winter to the beginning of spring, and Cuchulain sleeps only for 3 days during this time, when his father Lugh puts him to sleep and by chanting and heals him within a grave mound, and fights on his behalf while taking the form of Cuchulain. If this isn't an example that they were thought to be nearly identical, I couldn't think of another one. Though these 3 days are never explicitly given, it is likely that they correspond to the winter solstice, which is likely also the time he was first born or conceived. That Lugh would manifest of all times at this specific time when the sun and light is at its lowest should indicate the relationship of the deity and the sun is one of the sun's nadir, equivalent to Vedic Varuna. The forces of Maeve and Alil, with their white cows, seem to represent the forces of the underworld sapping the life from the land during winter, and Cuchulain alone is able to stand against them. He isn't able to stop them from this heist, but he is able to prevent total destruction and eventually win the war. Once Conchobar arrives, of course. The Dun Bull eventually kills the White Bull, just as Cuchulain eventually kills his friend, Ferdiad, in a direct parallel that seems intended by the bards. Cuchulain wins and obtains Maeve's daughter, Findavar, perhaps signaling the defeat of winter and the return of spring. Cuchulain is a multi-talented warrior who is skilled in everything, much like Lugh. His name Shatanta, knower of the paths, and Cuchulain, the hound, in many ways express his core nature. He is a fierce warrior with a black shield, described as dark, small, and melancholy, with the look of a beardless boy, and yet with the strength of the strongest warrior and the wisdom of the wisest sage. He is depicted as being liberal with the truth, but not a liar. He is unable to refuse someone a second request, just like Lugh. And this geish leads him to his ultimate downfall, when during the battle, a druid demands that he hand over his spear. He does so, casting it right through his head, but losing it nonetheless. Yet just as Cuchulain was said to have killed his own son, Cuchulain is killed by a man named Lugh. Only the cutting off of Cuchulain's hand truly kills him, for Lugh of the heroic hands was likely more than a metaphor, but was part of the belief that the hand was the power of magical potency, the very symbol of human action. Cuchulain had other geish as well, such as not looking upon naked women, which is used against him when he enters into his fury in order to make him avert his gaze. To cool his rage, he is submerged in 3 vats of water. He also must protect all the cattle and watch the borders, as well as protect the youth. His most fearsome moment is in reference to this. After he's healed by Lugh and learns that the boy troop has been slain, he launches into his most fearsome fury by night, and he screams out during the assault so that the goblins and the spirits of the air gather about him. Now this is a description of the wild hunt. Everything we have seen up to this point would lead us there. However, Cuchulain does have an association with the sun, as the master of pathways, as a representative of his father in a mortal form. And so he's associated with the borders, and just as he's associated with the borders of the visible sky, and he's the master of the pathways just as he is the master of the pathways through the sky as well. So he's associated with the horizon and the arc of the sun. And so his association with the sunrise and sunset, and also guiding the sun through the sky during the day, likely in the image of his father. For it says of Cuchulain that he only rested for a short while midday, leaning against his spear. The sun appears to slow down or even stop for a short while midday due to the perspective when it's directly overhead. However, from all the other things we've seen, the conclusion should not be that he is an exclusive solar deity. In terms of his physical description, he is most often associated with the sky as a totality, day and night, described as wind, as a flock of ravens, and as mist. When Cuchulain died, his spirit was later seen driving his chariot through the sky. It is certain that his father called him to the abode, the tumultuous Brug of the Golden Tree, where he continues his training, his combats, his hurling and game playing, whilst drinking the draught of immortality. To this day he drives his chariot of the skies, and comes to aid when he hears the cries. The enemies are coming, raise the din. He is stirring us to fight by day and night. For our lands, for our people, lend us your might. I'd like to thank all my Patreon subscribers. Gurv Mila Magat as Aishak, Agus Marigolni, Shas Gohard.